Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Saco School Board to order for December 8th, 2021 at 7 p.m. Let the record reflect that all these school board members are present. At this time, I'd like to invite you all to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Item 3 is approval of the school board meeting minutes dated for November 23rd, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Mayor,
School board member LaFortune.
I move we approve the school board meeting minutes dated November 23rd, 2021.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by school board member Johnston. Discussion on the school board meeting minutes. Any objection to school board member Archie or school board member Gale participating in the vote? No objection. Roll call vote. School board member Archie.
Yes.
School board member Preble.
Yes.
School board member Richard.
Yes.
School board member LaFortune.
Yes.
School board member Gale.
Yes.
School board member Truman.
Yes.
School board member Johnston.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item 4, any adjustments to the agenda? No adjustments to the agenda this evening. Brings us to item 5, any correspondence? All I can say is I think I speak on behalf of the entire school board when I say thank you to the Saco Pre-K for the wonderful wreath that's been placed in front of the dais here tonight. So thank you to the Saco Pre-K. With that, brings us to item 6, which is public session. First up for public session is Holly Trottier. Again, for those folks coming to the mic, please speak directly into the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and feel free to take your mask off while you're speaking into the microphone.
Holly Trottier. I do not live in Saco, but I am representing the Saco Education Association. So we, the members of the Saco Education Association, want to share information with the Saco School Board to take into consideration as you're thinking about your current relationship with Interim Superintendent Ray. The SEA strongly believes that all stakeholders should have an opportunity to have input in the decision-making process. That includes staff, parents, and community members. We're all partners in educating our students. At the October 27th school board meeting, you discussed either accepting the current relationship or going forward with a superintendent search. It is the Saco Education Association's belief that the process of holding a search allows for input from all stakeholders. Our neighboring communities, such as Scarborough and MSAD number 6, Buxton, they are holding superintendent searches, and they are asking for input from stakeholders through surveys and committee meetings. As elected school board officials, you're accountable to your constituents, and we request that you gather information from them to inform your decision. The Saco Education Association has the results of a survey titled Qualities for Our Next Superintendent, which we sent out to all Saco School Department staff. The 25 questions included a rating scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being not that important and 5 being very important. There were 171 staff members who participated in the survey, which is literally, according to my calculations, exactly 50% of teachers, ed techs, administrative assistants, and administrators. If you'd like a PDF of the survey results, we'd be happy to provide that to you at your request. So going through the survey, we found that there were 4 items that 80% or more of the surveyed staff rated as very important. Those qualities include quality number 1 on the survey, which is willing to consider different perspectives before making decisions. Quality number 6 on the survey demonstrates ability to work cooperatively with the Saco Education Association and keep educators and school employees informed. Quality number 11 on the survey is committed to including staff concerns in all decisions. And quality number 20 on the survey was promotes a positive school climate to ensure a safe learning environment. These 4 areas have a common denominator, the ability for a leader to work collaboratively with committees and staff members to make decisions. The Saco Education Association has requested 5 important committees to begin holding meetings, and at this time, none of those committees have been scheduled. We've also voiced a concern that professional development should be provided to our educational technicians, teachers, and other staff during our abbreviated Wednesday time to equal 3 hours a month, and to date, that time hasn't been scheduled either. Staff were also given an opportunity to provide additional comments on the survey in response to other qualities that are important, not listed in this survey, and a couple of the comments that were repeated several times are summarized here. The staff would like a superintendent who's focused on Saco as a distinct community. 19 people wrote in something to that effect. Staff would like a superintendent that listens to and works with staff members to solve problems and make decisions, who will talk with staff members about their concerns and educational interests. 35 individual respondents wrote something like that. Staff would like a superintendent who is transparent. 13 people wrote that in. Staff would like a superintendent who understands various special education, intervention, and specialist positions and strategies. And staff believe that putting education in the needs of students and staff should be the top priority. Again, the Saco Education Association strongly believes that all stakeholders should have an opportunity to have input into the decision-making process. We've taken the time to provide you with some staff input. There are still parents, community members, and other stakeholders who should be partners in your decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Noelle Gallant.
I don't need my time. I think that she might have used it, and
Thank
we just
you.
wanted to make sure we had enough time. Thank you.
Up next is Barbara Coleman.
School boards are there for the students, teachers, community at large. When you took the oath of office, you agreed to follow the policies of the operations of the schools, so hopefully answers can be provided regarding the following. First, Mayor, did I not sign in as required by the policy? Why is our superintendent still not following the policy that was provided at the last meeting that I spoke at and spoke to all of you? He is still going into the buildings and choosing not to sign in. I believe somebody needs to speak to him because it is a safety issue. Now I follow. Dear Mayor, School Chair, and Board, did anyone notice on the minutes approved tonight, it would have been last meeting, indicates the meeting was November 11th versus November 10th? So I would ask somebody to please check what is out on the website to make sure that those minutes have been corrected. Update on superintendent's search. Interest in their comments. Was an agenda item for October 27th, 2021 school board. What does not appear since that meeting is any further updates. Why? Has a decision been made behind closed doors already as to who is going to be hired? Or truly is a search going to be occurring? Public documents. Why is one required to request the minutes of the school board meeting? The October 27, 2021 minutes are locked and permission is required for access. That goes against public policy. As school board members, you should have all received training on public access, public meetings, documentation, and the ability to release certain documents by FOIA request, etc., by the Maine state statute. The mayor has been provided a link of frequently asked questions. You can obtain that from him. As a side note, as of October 18, 2021, there are additional individuals in the schools that require training. That has been passed along to other individuals as well. I've been advised by several sources that a fire occurred at Saco Middle School. Were the appropriate officials of the incident advised? Fire chiefs, mayor, other emergency responders? Was the scene cleared? Were parents and teachers informed? If not, why? Or have I not been told the truth by several individuals that reached out to me? Similar situation involving assaults on teachers at Saco Middle School. As referenced above, were the appropriate individuals contacted, including the parent of the student, and addressed? This should not be happening in our schools. How many employees work out of the Beach Street location? A number of staff have been moved to Biddeford. Who remains there? How much is it costing for a few individuals that have been informed that are at that location? If there's only a few, why not remove the rest to the other side, or actually bring them back to Saco where they belong? They are employees of Saco, and we are liable for them under our municipality, which is two entities, the city and the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Inga Brown.
Hi, good evening. I'm Inga Brown. I live at 161 Simpson Road in Ward 1. I actually have a handout for the members. May I approach and give a handout? Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a daughter in 6th grade at SMS. She's having a wonderful year. I have a son who graduated last year from TA, and I'm a teacher at Thornton Academy in the English department. I just wanted to say thank you to all staff, to school leadership, and to our parents who are working so very hard this year. It is without words to describe how difficult the challenges are. And I want to thank everyone for that. I also want to say congratulations to my Ward 1 School Board Representative, Mr. Arthur Archie, and also congratulations to William Gale. And so thank you for all your continued efforts in this very thankless endeavor. So I was hesitant to give you the handout ahead of time. As a teacher myself, I know sometimes my students don't pay attention if I give them the handout ahead of time, but I thought it might help to organize what I'm trying to present this evening. Some of you were at the council meeting on Monday night where I spoke, and so I'm very concerned about contract zones in our community. We have too many contract zones. You might know that last month the council voted 5-2 on a moratorium on new contract zones. That vote was suspended for procedural reasons, but I am hoping that it'll be on the agenda again. I think it's important for the board members to understand there is a very unique contract zone in Saco that pertains to Saco schools. So in 2016, a contract zone was signed with the ecology school, and on page 1 of your packet, I simply photocopied for you the page from the contract zone that pertains to the ecology school and its relationship to Saco schools. Each year, the ecology school must provide $40,000 in value of programming to our Saco students, and if they can't do that for whatever reason, they must make a $20,000 cash payment to the city of Saco. Contract zones, as you know, are legal agreements, and when the ecology school purchased the property at 184 Simpson Road as a nonprofit, the school doesn't pay property tax, and therefore the city decided that this contract zone should include this payment in lieu of taxes, if you will. Every January, the school leadership team receives a report from the ecology school to substantiate and document the value of programming. If you turn to page 5 and 6, I have simply included past reports from the ecology school. On page 5, you have the 2019 report, and I believe on page 6, you have a copy of the 2018 report. If you could just look at the report for a moment, the line items are classroom programs, field trips, overnight programs, curriculum consultation, and on the 2018 report, they actually had to make a cash payment to Saco for about $8,000. I had brought this issue forward to council several times. I find that this report could use more information. A building principal cannot recognize him or herself in this report. There are no schools are not identified in the report, which grades benefited from the programming. Certainly we can't identify individual classrooms, I think for FERPA reasons, but we can certainly provide greater information on the benefits of the programming. In full disclosure, I live on Simpson Road. I am not a direct abutter to the ecology school. I am a diagonal abutter. Since 2016, I have attended all council meetings, planning board meetings, site plan meetings, and I am very concerned about contract zones and making sure the city follows compliance. As a teacher, I want to be very clear with you. I value the programming of the ecology school. I know very well how important it is for enrichment programs, for getting our students outside, for hands-on learning. So I support the partnership very much. I'm just interested in transparency. This is a payment in lieu of taxes. The city has lost between $14,000 and $17,000 every year in taxes on the property, and therefore I feel that the values in the reports that are submitted every year should be more clear, and that Saco taxpayers are entitled to a bit more transparency on the services that are being delivered by the ecology school. At the November 22nd council meeting, the ecology school did present to council, and in that presentation, they did summarize for 2021 many of the services and programs that they have provided to the school system. So they are capable of very detailed, I don't have that in the packet, forgive me, but if you do turn to page 3, there is a section in the middle with bulleted items. And I just wanted to show this to you because oftentimes the ecology school is very clear in identifying that programs, this bulleted list, by the way, are programs they wanted to do in 2020, but COVID prevented them from doing it, which is understandable. But Young and Fairfield School are identified, which grades are identified. There was a field trip planned for Camp Ellis for 4th graders. There was going to be a 5-day residential program for 7th graders. So we see the detail. We see exactly which students were going to benefit. So I'd like to ask the school leadership team maybe to proactively discuss with the ecology school when they present their report, probably next month in January, that they can provide greater detail, if that makes sense. And I'll stop there. I hope to maybe speak again on this issue for any further clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you. That is it for those that have signed up for public comment. If there's any member of the public who would wish to speak to the school board, please come forward and be heard.
Hi, my name is Jessica Morris. I live at 17 Elm Street. I have a 1st grade son at Fairfield and a 3rd grader at Burns School. I'm just here to ask you all to consider keeping the direction we're going at minimum for one more year with leadership. We have a school construction process going, and it's going in the way it should. And to stop that right now and get somebody brand new in a district that already we were having a lot of issues, and I hope people don't forget that last year. So the school construction is a really big deal, and we should keep that to help us get to a bond. Also, some good things are I haven't seen as good communication from the district until now. Everything I get is something that if we didn't get, I would say, why weren't we told about this? Like the snow closures. I have no questions now how I will be told about that. You know, everything we get is great. I have approached the assistant superintendent before, and she's answered me so quickly and took the time to have a phone call and talk to me like a real person. She's great. The principal at Burns School took the time to speak to me on the phone, and it was like talking to a regular person. Things are going great as a parent, and I hope that you can see that. Picking a superintendent is one of your major jobs. That is something that you should consider. I have a son who is almost at first grade reading level now, and he started not even knowing his letter sounds in first grade. That wouldn't happen if we were still 2 days a week. And I know people can say, oh, well, we would get there, but we didn't. We had the space all along. It just took the right people, so please remember that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Moving on from public comment, brings us to item 7, Superintendent's Report. Superintendent Ray.
Okay, good evening. First and foremost, tonight, I was hoping to have something for Tony and Chuck for their service on the school committee, but like everything else, sometimes things get a little bit delayed. And I'm hoping that Charles and Tony will be able to join us at the next meeting so that we can show our appreciation for stepping up to the plate over a short amount of time to fill in on the board seats. And Charles, thank you for being here tonight. I know I didn't get a text message to you as soon as I would have liked to have, but thank you to those two for working with us as a board. This is just more of a, hopefully people are watching this at home, and we talk about COVID cases. And while we are beat down and we are tired and we want for this to end, we need to ask our community to use proper measures to prevent this. Our cases in the state of Maine are higher than they've ever been. What we do know is that in our schools, when we're wearing masks and we're washing our hands and we're worrying about distance, transmission is extremely low. Our nurses are working day and night, weekends, all the time, contract tracing. From a lot of it is the community exposure being brought in, and we know it's very difficult. But as a community, we need to stay vigilant because we have another set of holidays. Our kids need to be in school. We know that being home is not where they need to be, and we need everybody to take all of the precautions that they can so that we can safely be in school. Principals are working on their budgets. That will come my way in a couple of weeks, and I will give a budget timeline like I did to the city council the other night. As we talk about storm days, we got our first flurries today, and so it won't be long where we will be thinking about what morning calls will look like. We sent out a letter to families, staff, community, kind of on that process, and one of the pieces that the quickest way to find out in the morning time if we're going to have school is going to be to look at Twitter and Facebook, because that will be the first place that it's posted. Just that process in the morning is a lot of phone calls, a lot of text messages. The process to get it into the messenger system takes some time, and then there's also the process of reporting to the television stations. But the quickest and easiest thing to do first is to post on social media. So follow along, get on those sites, and you'll know bright and early of what we're thinking in the morning time. We also sent a letter this week talking about transportation challenges. And there's really a couple of different ways, a couple of different parts of that message that tend to work out. It's important for families to know that there's no real change to the schedule. But because of the lack of substitute bus drivers or bus drivers in general, if bus 714 doesn't have a driver that morning, as we start to experience more and more staff members, who get into the winter season who can become ill, just your random colds, and we also want people who show any, the random cold has the same symptoms as COVID, and you need to have people stay home. That without substitute drivers is an extreme challenge. So if, say, bus 714 can't run on a morning, we'll be sending out a message to parents that that first run may not occur and that it may occur later in the day. And we're hopeful that parents will be able to help us out with get kids in school. I've asked the principals to, begin to work on a plan about how early could someone drop off their kid, that just for the bus that, let's say, is canceled. Obviously, we can't do all kids, but if a parent knew that, hey, I could drop my kid off at, say, 7:20 that morning because my bus is canceled and still make it to work, our goal is to make sure our kids are in work. The second part of a message like that is we've had a couple of situations in the community where people who have a bus driver's license or has some transportation experience has reached out to us to say, hey, is there another way that we can help assist you guys in solving this problem? Another piece we'd like to mention is that if there's any families out there that need winter coats or gear, we have tons of it that's available for families, so please contact whether it's your school counselors or the office or the principals and need some help in that direction, that we have plenty of that in supply. Also, as Chris has emailed with Kevin and Beth, this summer we worked with Maine School Boards Association to come up with a policy review and to audit all of our policies, and we received sections A through D back last week with a response, and we have a lot of work to do just to update A through D, and then there will be a whole other section that will be coming back. So we're going to start picking away, looking at what are the required policies that we do not have on the books, and start in that section, and then begin to review all of those. But there is a hefty amount of work just with those first 4 sections for us to do. So, any questions through the board, from the board through the mayor?
I got a couple questions.
Sure.
So just to be clear, going back to the transportation issue, should it occur, is that going to, I thought I heard you say, if I heard correctly, that it would not impact the hours of the school day schedule, or it is going to change the schedule?
So it won't change the overall schedule. It could change the schedule for that particular bus run.
Okay.
So if 714 is one that you can't get in that morning, that would have to be a second run.
Okay.
And we have to think about the end of the day. That gives us a little bit of time to work with families. And again, our principals are working on, are there any solutions that there could be some earlier drop-off just for that particular run of the day. But the message that's out there is bus drivers and transportation staff are in tough demand, and we need to make sure that we have a solid bench. A lot of that is many of our subs and part-times are retired folks that may not winter here. And so we lose them for 4 or 5 months out of the school year. So need to continue to have anybody out there who's listening, if you have a bus driver's license, you want to get in condo or need training or want to be part of that service, we can gladly support that.
And I have a second question.
Sure.
Just for my curiosity, what are we doing anything specifically in the district for children that are in need for the holidays at all, besides just winter coats and things?
Yeah, so not only do we work on gear, but several of our partnerships with the Rotary Club. We have the Angels at Young School. I can't remember, is it the Christmas Tree Angels? I know I talked with Tina today. But there are a lot of different programs, and again, from that program to what our Rotary Clubs are doing in the area, there's been several families who have been adopted.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Any further questions for Superintendent Ray? School Board Member Truman?
Just a quick clarification about the school cancellations.
Correct.
For snow, you said the check social media, that's still going to make the phone calls too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just
You
making
still
sure.
make the phone calls, but the very quickest and
Okay.
easiest place is 30-second message there, and then you go into all the other pieces.
Perfect, thanks.
Any further questions, comments? School Board Member Johnston?
So this is a question, I think, and maybe it's a wild card question, but this is probably both for the superintendent and also for you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering with the amount of shortages that we have with bus drivers, if there are any other employees of the city who have the proper licensing, who could, on a pinch, take a bus route, for instance. It's just a question. I know there are other employees in the city who do have the license, the CDL. So I don't know. I mean, I know we're talking unions, and I don't know how that works, but it seems unfortunate if we could not utilize some of the other employees in the city who are qualified to run a bus at some point in time when we're fairly in need of it. I mean, we are trying really hard. Obviously, the superintendent is trying very hard to accommodate the situation for kids and parents. So I'm just going to throw that out as a question. And it doesn't need to be answered right now, but a suggestion question, I guess.
School Board Member Johnston, I can happily report that School Board Chair and I spoke about that last week, about the possibility of a volunteer program with Public Works folks that have access to driving, but without panicking Public Works staff and so forth. It's clearly just at the beginning, and Superintendent Ray does have an email that he received asking for the city to look into the possibility of voluntarily allowing folks to cross unions, cross employers, if they would like to help out with busing. But it's a very complicated matter, and I don't want to upset the apple cart by putting it out there, but it kind of already has, as we discussed it here. So with that, again, it is being looked at as a totally voluntarily program, and we'll report back as soon as we can.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Superintendent Ray, anything further of your report?
No, when you talk about that transportation issue, the other pieces that Mike Garrity and Jeannie are also just kind of, when you look at all those runs, you try to figure out if there's a way to say, well, and again, I'm just throwing numbers, if 713 and 715 can cover for 714 and get a few kids on that route, something they're looking at, but with so many different possibilities of how that would work, that becomes quite a challenge also with the spacing on the buses. So again, they're working really hard to try to figure those pieces out. But we need to hope that people are very healthy this winter.
Thank you. Moving on from the superintendent's report to item 8, Chair's report. Chair LaFortune.
Mr. Mayor,
School Board Member Johnston.
point of order. I'm not sure that I might not have missed it, but I'm not sure that we actually closed the public hearing. And this is an awkward time to mention it, but I didn't want to interrupt the superintendent's report.
There was no public hearing. School Board Member Johnston, there was a
The
public...
closing of the public comment, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we don't close public comment. It's just open to folks to come before us unless it was a public hearing on a certain matter. Then you would open the public hearing and then you would close the public hearing. But normally under public comment, public session, we don't open that and close that. Haven't in the 2 years that I've been standing here at the podium.
I'm sorry. I really am not just hearing well. Can you just repeat that?
So item 6 of the agenda is public session. We normally don't open or close that. It's just open to folks to come before us and speak. It's different than a public hearing on a certain matter where you would open it, discuss the certain issue, and then close the matter.
All right, well, that's not necessarily everything that I remember from the past, but I accept that. I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8, Chair LaFortune.
Sure, I just have something very quick, but to go back to that question that you had, I think typically what we've done is we've had the public session open until we essentially exhaust the list of people who have either signed up or raised their hand to speak, impromptu, and then we move on. And that's happened that way as long as I can remember. But the only thing that I have as an update is that there is no update. the question was raised during public comment as to whether or not any kind of decision has been made regarding the superintendent. We have not had a discussion of that at the school board level. This is the only place that that kind of decision gets made. And I want to be clear that if there's an assumption out in the public that because I didn't hear somebody make a decision, that a decision got made, it didn't happen. There's only decisions that are made here. And so with that, at this point, what has occurred is that we have had a brief meeting with some representatives from the Biddeford School Board to just kind of talk through, and this I had mentioned last time that we met, to talk through the current status of where we are at and what each board is sort of feeling just from a temperature standpoint. This past week, Mayor Doyle, Mayor Cassavant, myself, and Jeremy met just to get a sort of follow-up indication of whether or not all of the elected officials in both communities are on board with this idea. Should we move forward with it? And that's one thing to make sure that people understand, is that that is pretty much the price of admission before we even get anywhere, is if there is not universal interest from both the school board in Saco, the school board in Biddeford and Dayton, as well as the councils and mayors, then it probably is not going to go forward. Biddeford will not chase us if we aren't going to signal that we're interested in continuing. And that is kind of where we are at this point. The next step in the process is likely for us to make a decision here as to what we're going to do moving forward. But until that has occurred, and Biddeford has come back and said, we're waiting in the wings for you to tell us what you want to do, no decision has been made. So that's the status of the superintendent search at this point in time.
Thank you, Chair LaFortune. Any questions for the chair? Seeing no questions, moving on to item 9. There are no staff reports this evening. That brings us to item 10, which is there's no board subcommittee meeting minutes. And item 11, there's no old business for this evening, which brings us to item 12, which is new business. Item A is new hires. There's no board vote required. You do have in your packet a list of staff resignations and new hires. Superintendent Ray, anything on new hires?
Nothing.
Any questions for Superintendent Ray on new hires? Item A? No question. Moving on to item B, resignations. Again, no board vote needed. However, there was a memo in your packet with staff resignations. Superintendent Ray, any further on staff resignations?
Not at this time.
None at this time. Any questions for Superintendent Ray? School Board Member LaFortune?
Just a quick follow-up question. As it relates to the one administrator that's on the list?
Correct.
Have we posted the position?
Have not posted it yet.
Okay.
And when you say administrator, that is the HR director position?
Correct.
Thank you. Any questions on resignations? Item B, School Board Member Truman?
When is that resignation effective? Is there a date on that one?
They've asked for the 31st, but we can extend that longer.
Okay.
Any further questions? Moving on to item C, which is a COVID update. Superintendent Ray?
Yes, so each week we talk with our nurses, who are just, as I said before, they are the backbone of this, and the amount of work, effort, extra hours that our nurses are putting into trying to keep strong communications with families and testing, it's unbelievable what they go through, whether it be from after hours to on the weekends. Just totally impressed with everything that they'll do. And at the next meeting, we're going to actually have our nurses come here to the meeting to recognize them. Last week was a tough week for us, and we started to see the cases rise after the holidays. And so far this week, we're at 12 cases. Pool testing. Pool testing is doing what it should. It is catching cases and allowing our schools to have communication with families, allowing us to keep kids in school from contracts in the sense that they're in pool testing and we know that they're negative. And so as we start to lead into the next holiday season, and as I said beforehand, as a community, just practicing all of the good measures that we do, and again, it's not just in schools, this is a community piece that we all have to think about. But as we also come back from vacation, we're going to experience a lot of youth in our community who will now be fully vaccinated after the 14 days, which will again help the quarantine situation even more. To say that as a state, do I certainly worry? Yes, because I think the cases are going up. We know our hospitals are full. But what we can feel good about is that, at least in our schools, the in-school transmission is low. What we need to be concerned, and again, just stay vigilant on as a community, is the outside of school stuff we have to pay attention to. And so we'll be keeping a close eye over the next couple of weeks.
Any questions from the school board on the COVID report? School board member Gale?
Just a quick question, on the vaccination clinics, is there one scheduled that's going to be coming up, or when is the next clinic in our area?
So we offered it 5 different clinics in the area. The second shot for in Dayton tomorrow night, and at JFK School on Friday night. We've had the 2 clinics here for the second shots are done in Saco. And so we were able to vaccinate over 730 youth in the area, plus all the outside facilities. So we've got a couple left. But those are only for people who will be getting their second shots. We cannot do first shots at those ones.
And this is on the website, correct, Superintendent Ray?
This document?
Yes.
Yes, it's all on the
Thank
agenda.
you. Any further questions for Superintendent Ray? School Board Member Preble?
Couple questions. Are we planning on having another clinic for any other children that may have missed the clinics that just happened? And my other question, just so you can roll it all into one, is there a clear written policy now that we have children vaccinated where parents can get to it easy instead of having to ask the poor nurses 5,000 questions about how do I quarantine, what do I do with this? Is there like a written document, somewhere on the website that parents can get to and find so they can get a clear answer? So if the nurse says this, that they have a document to reference.
Well, so we've sent out the SOP a ton of different times. They've been in the nurses' updates. They're on the nurses' page in our piece. Challenge with the SOP is you got like 7 or 8 pages there of a lot of different information that changes, from every month. And then we're told that to expect another change to the SOP after the holidays. What that change will be, we've gotten 0 information on.
Okay.
I suspect it will be around vaccination status. As far as at this time, we don't have additional vaccination clinics planned on the school site. It's working with the hospital, your pediatrician, or again, some of the quickest places is just to hit your local pharmacies.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the school board?
Mr. Mayor?
School Board Member Archie?
So just for clarification, are those being vaccinated still in pool testing?
So that would be a parent's option on the pool testing piece. Once you're vaccinated, you, as a parent, they would obviously have that choice not to be in pool testing. We hope that some of them continue to be in pool testing, as the pool testing thing is just a great way to keep your family safe and your kids fit and your kids safe and your classmates. And quite frankly, as a parent myself, I like the peace of mind once a week. Like I love that piece of coming home and saying yeah, that's clear. I'm negative. My kids are good to go, or the weekend's coming up, or, you know, you're going to visit your parents or grandparents or whatever, and you have that piece, but those are individual family decisions.
And we're comfortable with that decision at the moment?
That we would allow them out. Again, I think that's that all the way along the SOP and the, you know, vaccinations and pool testing on that piece have been a family decision, except for last month when we talked about athletics, because again, there's so much close contacts in athletics. There's no way to post up in a basketball game without having a little bit of contact, and I think that's something that you have to worry about. And again, not all of our kids in our schools are participating in pool testing.
Can I just add that my kids, my two youngest just got their final shots today, and I'm going to keep them in the pool testing just because the number of times that they've been close contacts with classmates has been enough to have me on edge. And even my older one, who's been vaccinated since June, I've had her in pool testing the whole time. So it just gives you a little bit of peace of mind. And again, like with the little chart that the nurse sends out to everybody, it tells you clearly, like, if your kid is vaccinated, then they don't have to quarantine. If they aren't, then this is what happens. And if they are in pool testing, that this is what happens. It's a pretty straightforward breakdown on how that works. So, and I'm well versed in it because it's happened multiple times being close contacts. So,
Thank you. Any further questions from the board?
Just had a quick question. For those who might still be interested in joining pool testing, is it still available to whoever might want to, you know?
Yes, we send that information out every week and certainly encourage any participation that we can, because that you kind of have some growth that can occur. It's pretty easy to add one to one pool, one to the other. And again, I think there's a strong belief that testing component really keeps our schools safe.
Anything further on the COVID update? Moving on from the COVID update to item D, which is a budget timeline. Superintendent Ray?
Okay, so just wanted to talk about budget timeline. I know you guys were all with us the other night at the city council meeting when we talked about the budget. But as we look at the timeline, to begin, we have teachers and principals who are currently working on budgets to prepare prior to we go home on at vacation time for the holidays, getting those in our direction so that we can begin to review. Part of the pieces that will be different in this budget this year is that as school committee members, you will get a document that my guess is going to be about 600 pages, 300 front and back, that will be detailed for every single item that we're looking to order. Big purpose of that is when someone says, hey, cut $100,000, you have to then go and target what that $100,000 will be, and you know that there are items, whether that be staff, supplies, utilities, etc., that you got to draw the line through, so that you'll get to see things like what are our staff costs, what are our insurance costs, what are supply requests, what are software requests, what are your maintenance and utilities. So you'll get a very detailed package, and Jason has been working on his end, him and the business office, on just updating the staffing piece first, and then you take all of those requests from principals and directors and you pull that all into a budget so that we have a detailed budget by school of all of the things that we purchased. You'll have a district level component, you'll have a transportation component, special education is mixed in with the schools, and then you can begin to look at those 11 cost centers. As we look at the timeline, beginning in the reviews in January by the superintendent, business manager, and each building principal, we'll begin to go through that piece and begin to whittle down what that expenditure side looks like. As we start to bring the finance committee along in that piece, one of the major pieces, which is the other side of the coin, is that while there's expenditures, there's also revenues, and those go hand in hand. And so we can expect to see revenues Typically, in the second year of the biennium, which we're in, usually the ED 279s is a little bit faster coming our way because they've already set the budget and put an amount in. Certainly, legislature has the ability to go in and add more, which sometimes we hope that they do. But you'll start seeing things out in the public probably late January, February, as we start to get both sides of the coin, so that when we're talking about the issue, we are talking about the whole package. I think that's a really important piece in the budget process, is that you don't have different pieces at the same time. Let's get the picture out there. Let's have the conversation so that we know exactly what we're dealing with. In March, we need to give an initial presentation to the Saco City Council. And then in March and April, you'll continue to revise that budget, have budget conversations. And typically by the first weekish in April, last week in March, you tend to get your health insurance rates. This year, we have 10% built into the budget on health insurance rates, because I think there is some concern about, what will the COVID impact be on the insurance policy piece. If you're looking at 10%, Jason, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 10% is probably going to be right around $350,000 in increased health insurance costs as a district. But we'll have that information about, knowing what every 1% is in that piece. In May, the City Council will need to vote, and then in June, we will have the budget referendum. Now, some of the things that we worry about in the FY23 budget, I think all municipalities, and school departments are a little bit lucky because we have a lot of federal funds floating around. But as I've shared with you several times, we need to be very concerned about that overall cliff that can come by having federal funds. If you use federal funds to fund positions, eventually it comes due on the local side. And so that's something that we've been able to avoid, and hopefully we can continue to avoid. And we look at how some of those federal funds can maybe offset some of those other types of costs over the years from equipment, supplies, that may give us a little bit of relief. As we start to think about capital costs that we have, capital costs are a situation where we really need to be thinking about the projects that we do, meaning that as you look at electrical situations, if you look at electrical supplies right now and wire, you know that that's something that's really high. Just like this spring when lumber was off the charts. I think that we will want to prioritize any of our capital upgrades based off what pricing and things will do. In addition, we need to be concerned, not so much this year, but I believe FY24 will be more difficult as we look at rising property values in southern Maine and how those exceed state average. If we follow along the trend that 17 to 18% is what people have been talking about, house price increases and value increases, if that far exceeds everything in the state of Maine, you're going to see a massive drop in state subsidy because your valuation goes up. And so as a group of elected officials, and we work with our state officials, we're going to need to make sure that information gets to them over the next couple of cycles, because you're going to see your Cumberland County and along the coast of Maine have huge increases in valuation, which will then push state revenues out to your more rural areas. So that is something that's a major concern for us. Additionally, we need to look at the impacts of learning on our students in special ed and regular ed, and also some of the social and emotional impacts that's had on students that will factor into the puzzle. We also just have to look at the simple things, as a box of crayons is going to cost more. Box of crayons is going to cost more because of shipping, because of production. And we're going to have to realize that all of those items that we have in our home that cost more impacts the school. Food for lunches costs more. Gasoline costs more. Diesel costs more. we're not immune to electrical bills. I think that we're going to need to be looking at anywhere around 20% on many of our utilities, because there's so much kind of just understanding what power rates are going to look like. Now, there's been some good news in the last couple of weeks that natural gas prices have come down, which hopefully will not drive our electrical rates as much, but there's all of those issues that we have to be careful about when we put out that budget. Now, from the backside of things, which is good news, is that we carried over approximately $250,000, which can be additional revenue. We have been able to, through this budget cycle, we owed the city about almost $1 million, which through the use of how we used our subsidy this year, we'll be able to pay that back so that at the end of the year, we've got zero on that end of things. Certainly, we know that tuition is a big piece for us and a big factor that we need to plan on, and we don't have those numbers yet. But that's kind of an outline of the timeline of where we're at, where we'll be going, and how we can put together something pretty clear for the community that says this is the picture and this is the total picture, and this is how we move forward.
Thank you, Superintendent Ray. Any questions for Superintendent Ray? I know that this is the second time many of you are hearing the information, so. Any questions? No questions. Okay, moving on to item E, which is Curriculum Design Team. Superintendent Ray.
I'd ask Mick Parkhurst to please come up on that.
Thank you. I wanted to provide a brief update this evening on some of the major goals of each of the core curriculum content area teams that will be working in pre-K-8 teams. This year, those teams were on hold last year following COVID and in order to give staff time to focus on instruction. So to begin with English Language Arts, as has already been mentioned, as we've discussed some of the federal funds, the focus for that will be in looking at a phonics and word study programming and ensuring that we have that scope and sequence aligned for pre-K through 8. Moving on to math, we have one teacher per grade level in our K-5 program, piloting Eureka Squared, which is the next version of our current programming of Eureka Math. So the K-5 group will really be understanding the effectiveness of that and making a decision about whether we need to move to full implementation. With our 6-8 team, taking a look at ensuring that we have consistent resources 6-8 and doing a full-scale look at all those resources that are available and selecting one which we would then recommend to the board for adoption. Our science team is looking to solidify what those offerings are with the Ecology School. As was mentioned, we have a very fruitful partnership with the Ecology School and just ironing out exactly which grade levels are offering what and ensuring that there's equity across schools and across grade levels and that the scope and sequence of what's being offered is in alignment with the curriculum. And lastly, our social studies team will be working to articulate the units of study for social studies with a special eye to LD 1664, which includes the study of African American studies and genocide within the curriculum. We are certainly confident that there are points throughout the scope and sequence where that's touched upon, but with that legislation, we want to be sure that we are hitting those marks in line moving forward. Not mentioned on this document, but we did have our wellness committee meeting this week, and that team meets 3 times a year and talks about programming for staff and for students and educating the community. We are a Let's Go partnership, and that has been fruitful in helping both our staff and students be healthy and well, and you can look for more information on that if you would like. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Parkhurst. Any questions from the board? School Board Member Gale?
Thank you for the memo. It's really well outlined. I think, is this information available online in terms of the timeline and kind of what the process will be like throughout the rest of the year?
So this memo is available online. As of right now, we have not published or posted our curriculum team agendas or minutes, but we can certainly discuss the possibility of making that more publicly available.
And then just following up on that too, on the last sentence notes that any members of the public that have questions to direct them to you?
Yes, that's correct. Feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to explain in more detail
Great.
what any team is working on.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, brings us to item F, a school construction update and FAQ. Superintendent Ray.
Okay, again, sorry, this is information that you guys heard the other night, but again, we cannot talk about the school construction project probably enough in public. As you know, we have a great opportunity here in Saco where we have an approval for a new school building. And part of that process is, as a community, going through all of the different options, all of the different pieces that build this puzzle in conjunction with some pretty interesting rules that will come from the state and a lot of different qualifying factors that we need to figure out. One of the charges that we've looked at as a group that's had, since August, we've had 3 different committees going, had over a dozen different meetings. We have a building committee, which is kind of what will report back to you, to the board. We have a site inventory committee, which is out there looking at all pieces of land throughout the city to say, hey, this might be a place where we could have a school. And then we have a programs committee that is really out there focused on what would be the appropriate grade levels to put into a building. And then at the same time, we have conversations with the Department of Education. And over the last couple of months, the program committee started with a list of about 13 to 14 different possibilities of how you could configure schools. And one of the pieces that's challenging for us is that no matter what decision we probably make as a community, there's going to be existing problems and challenges that remain. And one of the pieces that we talk about from time to time is, well, how do you bring equity across the city? Because certainly you have 2 pre-K, you have 2 K-2 schools. You have Burns schools. We're in the 100th year anniversary. And so as you begin to look at some of those challenges, people certainly have a lot of different ideas. And we were able to have a meeting with Oak Point and the school construction team the other day, and it becomes pretty clear that they're just not going to solve every problem for Saco. And that we're going to have to make some choices along the way of what we think is going to be best for us. And so the program committee has really looked at and narrowed down to, we have, they're class 1 through 4, but some of them have some sub-options. So we have about 6 options left that we're exploring. And those range from a pre-K through 3 building on a new site, and looking at 4 to 5, staying at Burns School, knowing that Burns School has some capacity issues that's in place right now. We also have a situation where we'll be looking at a pre-K through 2 school on a new site and leaving Burns School as is. We've looked at an option of a pre-K and K school. We've looked at building a new 1 through 5 school. We have an option of a pre-K and K school on a new site versus renovating Fairfield, and an option of a 2 through 5 school, and then there's an option of a pre-K through 5 school. Now, does that mean that any of the other options that we put on the list are off the table? Certainly not. That just means that those are kind of fallen to the back a little bit, and that the program committee was interested in talking about these options first and foremost with the committee. Now, what Oak Point will do during this time is they will begin to study all of the costs that are associated for these, both statewide and locally. They'll look at the conditions of the buildings. They'll look at the sites of the buildings. One of the things that we look for in new construction that you can see in the frequently asked questions that are on here is that the state is going to require on a new site to have at least 20 acres and then 1 acre per 100 students. And so if you're looking at 800-person school, you've got to have 28 buildable acres, which is not exactly the easiest thing to find just immediately in the perfect location in the city. Now, the state, what they'll do is in this process, they are willing to purchase land for you if you don't own it. And if you do purchase land, they take 2 estimates of the price and they work it out with you of what they're going to pay. If you need to buy something bigger or you want to buy something bigger than what they will pay for, that would be a city cost. And again, cities are encouraged in towns to think about the future and expansion and making sure you're having plenty of buildable ground. So we are at the steps now where the site inventory committee will be coming back together next week and to start to think about what might be the best places or pieces of land throughout the city so that we can start getting from a list of 22 or 3 pieces of property down to a much more manageable list that we would need to evaluate. And then from that point, trying to match them with all of the different possibilities that you want. Any of this work, what's important to remember is that this is a process that is voted on by the community. So as a community, whatever gets put on the ballot is something that the school committee will make the decision of with all of that information, looking at the evaluations from Oak Point, looking at the traffic studies, looking at the impact of what's left, looking at the local costs that could come into this piece, so that there's a very clear picture of whatever decision you make that you have left. And certainly as community members, we probably all have an opinion of what we think is best for the future of education of Saco, and that will be an opportunity that will all get weighed out in public and having a couple of meetings where you have to have a couple of straw polls to move things forward before you hit the official vote at the ballot type situation. So hopefully we can be in a position where next November we are voting on what the direction of Saco schools will go. One of the things that we have to be very cautious of and concerned about here is that, as we all know, construction costs are rising in every facet of life. So the construction of new school costs are rising as well, which is impacted in the way that the state of Maine they have a debt limit for school construction. And so we're the next 2 schools, us and Wyndham are the 2 that are working right now. We have to be careful that doesn't play out too long either, and that debt limit gets reached and you're placed on hold a little bit more. I believe that debt limit's at $100 million or something that they pay for each of those years, and that's a factor. As the cost of school construction rises, all of those projects cost a lot more. I would be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you, Superintendent Ray. Any questions from the board? School Board Member Gale.
Just a couple of quick questions. Is the membership for these committees, is that still open if an individual member of the public would like to be a part of that, or is that closed?
So those committees are set by the school committee, but I mean, again, our goal is to have people who are there who are interested, because you just bring it together at the beginning. certainly anybody can come in and sit in on a meeting. They're usually here because it seems to be the biggest space. But yeah, I mean, you get the voices there because you're going to be dealing with this at the, through the other pieces, and certainly everybody has different ideas. Now, we certainly need to have a manageable group of individuals so that we can advance things forward, but certainly.
The meetings themselves have typically been up here, and they are open to the public. That's both the curriculum programming meeting, programming committee meeting, as well as the site selection committee meeting. The list that's in the packet, that is the configuration of the building committee, which was set by the school board, as well as the way that the two subcommittees were put together. As the process moves along, there will likely be additional subcommittees that will come along once we get farther down the path of actually having a site selected and basically a preliminary design on a building, and then we'll start to get into all sorts of committees related to libraries and different spaces. And so there definitely will be additional opportunities for many other people to be involved. I would anticipate that if we had additional committees, that we'll have 4 or 5 other columns like you have on that sheet right there, with perhaps lots of names that aren't even listed there. It's basically just going to be how the process goes along that will dictate that.
Once you get into the design phase, after you've passed the referendum piece, that's where a lot of different committees will come in, from furniture to colors to design to playgrounds to some of the landscaping, those types of things, artwork, signage, all of those pieces.
Any further questions? School Board Member Preble?
Superintendent Ray, can you please clarify for me when the next public meeting I know we have like the committee meetings open to the public, but when's the next informational session where the public can come in and have more updates?
Yeah, so that'll be sometime in January. There's some work that we need to have done by Oak Point first before we get to that piece. Obviously, some big pieces that need to be done is we have contracts with the DOE around the reviews of each of our buildings so they can produce that number of, what's the extra estimated repair cost, what's, if you do this, then you get this, what's the work that needs to be done. We also have to have a population study done, so a school enrollment study that needs to be done, because right now we're just basing things on, to move the work on the 200 per classroom figure, but we will have much more, I don't want to say hard numbers because anything's a projection, but you get a study done on your population, which will then impact, based after the DOE looks at that study, accepts that report, then that's how they will calculate square footage of what you'll be allotted. So if they say that grades 3 through 5 will have 571 students, and that's what you decided to build for a reason, their square footage and their estimates would be based off that, whether that be for cafeteria, classrooms, gymnasium size, et cetera, et cetera. And then as a community, you might say, hey, we want to have something a little bit bigger, or we want to put this add-on, and that's where local costs can come in.
One other item to note with that, since you were bringing up specific spaces, the numbers that the state has put in place for how big things can be assumes separate UA spaces for each individual. Art has a room, band has a room. There's no like shared spaces that are built into the numbers that they have. So it's a much different experience than I think many of us are used to here.
School Board Member Archie?
Do we have a time frame on the inspection of the buildings and the population numbers?
I think that we will have the inspection piece they've been working on. You'll get that information by January, I'm sure. Those are kind of the next big steps that when we spoke the other day that Oak Point needed to focus on. And then there's very few companies that do the work of the kind of the census work. And so, you're in the queue. That will be a little bit longer.
Any further questions?
Just
Board Member LaFortune?
a follow-up on the question around sizes. So these numbers that we have are a generalized 200 per grade level. How close to what we currently have per grade level is that number?
So that's a little bit higher than what we'd have. And this is assuming that we would be universal pre-K as well at this point in time. Those numbers would be a little bit lower. What was interesting, and I don't off the top of my head, I don't remember the numbers, but we looked at what our student population was based off the report that you had 5 years ago. And they were like right on the money of what they expected for the population to be when you started the work on Young School, 5 or 6 years ago. The other piece that we're doing, Kevin, just as we talk about that piece, is Meg has been working with several members of the community to try to establish a school construction timeline of our buildings so that we can kind of put that right out there as like, this is when Saco did this, and this is when they started this, and this is when Young School started, and this is when this other conversations occurs or committees, so that people can understand all the work that's been done in the past and where we are today.
In regards to that last piece that you were just discussing, is this going to be like the library fundraiser kind of thing where you get to watch it, or is
I don't vision it going up. I see it more of it going this way. But Meg will let us know how she puts that together, and we'll review that. And we hope to have something out again after the holidays. Again, we see that as a big piece in that public meeting, so that people can understand that the last time you did something was here. As this has been an ongoing conversation for a long time, and now we're presented with this opportunity, and we've got to get it right.
the way you described it, I was just envisioning a giant board. And then one more question too, I think someone already asked it, but with the upcoming dates, that'll be on the website
Yeah, so
for all the other committees.
Well, and then just like we did in December, we sent out a couple of special notifications. It was in the superintendent's SMORE, I think in the principal's SMORE as well, because those are important ones. That I think you'll start to gain a little bit more interest once you start to refine things and talk about sites, because sites will be a big one, because that will have everybody's interest when they start thinking about traffic, bus times, like when you start doing the math on, okay, I might have to sit through this light, this road, or my kid's going to be on a bus from 10 minutes to 40 minutes, whatever that location. You're going to start getting people involved a lot that way. And then the other beast, when you start talking about grade level configurations, I know that on some of the on a couple of the committees, Nathan and I were the ones that had the two youngest kids on that committee, and we're talking about building a school, that neither of our kids will be in. And I've got a second grader. It's just, it takes so long that it's probably not going to impact them. And so that's a tough thing in these processes for communities to deal with, because if you said to Jeremy right now, hey, your school is going to be here in this grade level, I get a reaction thinking about my own personal situation. And then I remember, I'm not ever going to experience that. And so those pieces will come out. And then the other really important information that we will be searching for, and Oak Point will be working on, is as you start to lay out where some of these properties are. And remember, you're thinking about properties that have typically a lot of access to public utilities, because you're going to need those things. But we also have to think about where the future growth in the city is, because where your population is today may not be where your population is tomorrow, and the neighborhood that has a ton of kids in it today, in 20 years, might be a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of kids in it. And so those are some things that you have to project and think about where's the best location for this. And then once narrowing that down, begin to think about the operational impacts of this. Because wherever that's located in the city, there's going to be a transportation. There's going to be a transportation output for that, which may mean different start times, may mean different bus routes. How long does it take to go from A to B and do that twice? Those types of things. So that's when all the fun work starts to come in to play.
Any further questions? Seeing no further questions, moving on to item G, support for students at SMS. Superintendent Ray.
Could Meg or Chris please come up? So just to introduce this piece, we've been doing some work and working closely with Principal Hawkins on just how some of our middle school students are struggling a little bit and what can be some of our responses that, again, there are many different ways to work with situations, and we feel that a supportive approach is the best way, and I'll turn it over to Chris and Meg for this one.
Yes, good evening. I'd refer you to refer the board and the public to the memo that's inside your packet. But I think it goes without saying that nobody relishes suspending students, and that behaviors that manifest in our schools are often related to a school-based event or made worse by the avoidance of school. As often as possible, we want our kids in school. We want them there to learn, to be fed, to be cared for. Nevertheless, there are times, certainly, when building leaders have an obligation to remove children from school who pose a danger to themselves or a danger to others, or the risk of a significant disruption to the operation of the school. This year at Saco Middle School, 19 students have been suspended, and a third of those suspensions have been directly attributable to a violation of policy JIHC, which is about the use, possession, or paraphernalia of prohibited substances. This policy's adoption predates the membership of anybody on this board, or the mayor, or the present superintendent. And nevertheless, I think it's noteworthy that disciplinary action is more prominent in the policy than intervention. And that, I think that says something. The policy compels schools to, quote, aid students in obtaining assistance from appropriate community organizations, close quote, if the schools aren't able to provide the kind of counseling, support, and intervention that students need inside the building. So as we've worked with Ken at Saco Middle School, Meg and I have started talking about what are some of the ways that we could get some more direct expert support to students who struggle with substance abuse issues, so that instead of just suspending and hoping that parents are able to effectively intervene, that we can offer expert services to get kids kind of on the right track and hopefully open some doors to more healthy choices in the future. And we basically have two options. Number one, we could ask this board and the community to sponsor a 6-figure salary and clinical supervision and insurances and all that sort of thing for a full-time professional to come work in the school. The second option, which most schools in York County, most middle schools in York County have gone with, is to hire an outside agency. And the way that that becomes a much more cost-effective and operationally effective proposition for the school department is that those outside agencies are able to bill insurances and main care in a way that the school department isn't. So that we could have between, say, a 3/4-time person and a full-time person from a program for a small pro rata share of the actual cost because of their ability to bill, or because they're nonprofits and they are often grant funded. And so we're coming before this board today to propose to you that the board immediately not waiting until the next fiscal year, allocate about half of a $15,000 to $20,000, what would be an annual commitment, to engage in a contract with Day One Services, a well-known provider of substance abuse counseling in Southern Maine, to deploy between a 3/4 and full-time person at Saco Middle School. The obligation of our school would simply be to provide privacy, space, an internet connection, and access to a telephone. And in exchange, Day One Services would come in, survey the staff, meet with students, meet with Ken, and give us their opinion about what the best fit would be as far as personnel and how much time this person could be in the school. This would help us support students in a really, really cost-effective way. And this is an arrangement that could start as early as January. The cost that I've laid out in your memo would be for a full year of service, not half of a year of service. And it's also kind of a worst-case scenario. In other words, Day One says, whenever possible, we're going to bill out to Maine Care or we're going to bill out to private insurances. But in the event that there's a shortfall in their funding, they're asking us to sort of earmark a fund to make up that difference. So the question before us is, A, does this board support the position? And B, does it make sense that we engage an outside agency at 1/6, 1/7 of the cost, especially one that works with so many schools already and is kind of housed right here in our backyard? I don't know if you have anything.
Thank you very much. Any questions at this time from the board? School Board Member LaFortune?
Yeah, I have a quick question just around the funding. So the allocation of, if it were a full year, up to 20,000, that isn't something that we are paying out for services when they occur. The process from Day One is that they would, this is essentially like a backstop for them, and that they would, as a first option, bill that out, and then if there was some gap in the funding that came from that's when this would be drawn upon?
So that would be part of the MOU, Kevin, so that they weren't stuck holding the bill at the end of the year. It would be that we obligate those funds and sort of set them aside. They have tiers of mitigation against loss. So for example, if they deployed someone in our school 5 days a week, and it turns out that the need was actually only 4 days a week, that they would immediately utilize that person to do individual work at Day One. And so they would mitigate that loss through some of that direct billing, but that in the event that there was any sort of gap, that kind of a worst case scenario. So that $15,000 number is for about a 3/4 time person. The higher end is 20,000. And again, that would be for a full year. If we were able to make effective kind of a January start, we'd be looking at about a $6,000 to $7,000 cost. I think when you look at that and the impact that it can make for some of our kids and how it can support Ken and his counseling staff to focus on other needs in the building, I think that this is a simple, reasonable, responsible ask of this board.
Mr. Endorf, will you be bringing a contract forward for the school board to look at, or an MOU for the school board to look at, for them to actually take action on, or are you asking them to take action based upon this memo?
We certainly can. It doesn't reach the threshold of a contract where we would have to have a vote. The dollar amount simply isn't going to be high enough for this year, Bill. It would be in subsequent years because it's over that $15,000 threshold, but I'd defer to the board chair and the superintendent on the best way to proceed with that. It's fairly boilerplate language. It's eminently copy and pastable. Wyndham's looks the same. Noble's looks the same. We're not going to deviate significantly or sort of negotiate language. Ken's already said that he can provision the space and the phone and the privacy and all that sort of thing. But
Thank you,
however,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Superintendent Ray. Are you asking for a vote this evening?
Yes, I'm asking for a vote this evening because I believe that support is 100% needed for our students. We've spoke with Ken several times, and our current process of not having the support there for kids who are struggling and families who are struggling is something that is needed. We have savings in our budget in several areas, in some of our special education costs and in our tuition pieces to cover this $20,000. The other piece is that once you engage in one of these relationships for a number of years, they have a pretty good expectation of what that dollar amount would be. In year number 2, if this was to continue, this would be something that would be in your budget as a line item, so that you know what those costs are. And again, I think as a community, when we look at these numbers, we look at the information that our kids are sharing with us on surveys and the data that we have an obligation to provide this type of support, and I highly encourage you guys to approve this piece.
Thank you. School Board Member Gale?
2 questions based on the memo. You had mentioned that for whatever reason, SMS did not participate in the biannual survey. It looks like it's the next administration of it, if it is going to be administered, will be in 2021. Will SMS participate in that, or is that survey still going on?
Yes, SMS did participate this fall, and we double-checked that as soon as we saw that it hadn't been administered in prior years.
And then, as it relates to this position, will this person only be doing substance abuse and drug counseling, or will they have flexibility to intervene in any other type of kind of behavioral issues?
My understanding is that based on how they code for insurance and for main care, that they're really kind of driving in a narrow lane.
Yep.
And again, if they come in and assess, hey, we think you could benefit from a 3/4 person, and it ends up being less than that, then they might scale that position back. But again, they'll mitigate their loss. You know, when I spoke with the director last week or the week before, she said, we have plenty of work for these folks. They're not going to go, sitting in a room waiting for the next person to come in. There is no minimum buy, so if the board says a year from now, we only want a half-time person there because that's all we feel we can afford, or for whatever reason, they're not going to turn us away and say, sorry, we need at least 3/4 time or full-time. Because again, most of their folks are fairly itinerant. Their home office is a touchstone, but they're really out in the community and travel frequently. One commitment we did ask if they could make is a consistent schedule. So if hypothetically we went with a half-time position, that person would be there every single day for half the day, rather than just Monday through Wednesday at noontime. And that's really important for kids with substance abuse issues because they're often also absent from school. And so if a child's absent Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and would like to access a service on Thursday and that person is in the building, that's a real challenge as far as, from a clinical standpoint. So we feel like they have a really solid model in place, and they've been doing this for 25 years.
Any further questions? School Board Member Archie?
So since you're asking for a vote today, I do like this idea, but what I'm not seeing is how it's going to change the punishment. Do we have a breakdown of how that's going to change and what our kids can expect?
So I think your question is a good one, and I think it's best answered in 2 ways. First, Superintendent Ray referred earlier to the comprehensive policy review that we have underway with the help of Maine School Management to look at whether or not the policy as it reads is appropriate, if it's a little too draconian, if it relies too heavily on punishment and not enough on prevention. I think that's kind of part 1 to your question. And then the second is a review of the handbook and the practices at Saco Middle School and across the district. So not to get too in the weeds with you, but I think part of the issue that we have interrogating the data is that it hasn't always been coded the same way. The principal before Ken or the principal at Burns School may have interpreted a behavior infraction in a different way and coded it differently in Power School. So that when we try to look at multi-year data and say, what's our trend line here? Like, is substance abuse up? Is it flat? Is it declining? We're comparing apples and oranges. We're really not in an apples-to-apples comparison, which is why we really wanted that Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, because that's really a reliable tool. Been around, I think, from the University of Michigan for 30 years. It's anonymous. Kids are remarkably candid, and they tell you, yeah, I'm sneaking this. I'm doing this at school. I'm doing this with my parents. And that data is really helpful, too. But again, unfortunately, we don't have the 2019 or 2017 data. So it's a little bit empirical at this point. We're relying on the professionals at Saco Middle to say, you know what, we could really benefit from this support. I think we'd be in a better position to let data inform the policy and make revisions to both the policy and the handbook moving forward.
So in other words, there would be more of a case-by-case situation?
Yeah, I think
that's how I'm
true.
perceiving it?
I think that's true. I mean, there are some students who violate this policy who, for their safety or the safety of others, ought probably be suspended from school. There are a lot of students who violate this policy who aren't being malicious, who are injuring themselves, and we're going to try and help them make better decisions so that they can continue to be engaged with school and have kind of a healthier outlook. We don't want the de facto position to be, how long can I suspend this kid for? We want the de facto question to become, what can we do to support this kid?
Okay, thank you.
School Board Member LaFortune?
I have a question just regarding the MOU. So the amount that we're talking about right now within this budget, under normal circumstances, we probably wouldn't even discuss here because it is a small amount, but we are also talking about something that's going to be in place for probably, hopefully forever. This is a fantastic idea. That's probably long overdue. If we are unlikely to see the start of this until January, I would feel more comfortable if we could at least see the MOU at the next meeting and then make the decision then. Because I think we have one, not next week, but the week after. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we have one. We have one the week after. And again, just I know for us, we've worked with Day One for several years. Certainly, we can bring that MOU, but I would at least like to have an opportunity to move forward, meaning work with Day One, try to get somebody in place. These things take time. And I think that as a community, the things that we feel bad about is that we are suspending kids or Ken's working with kids because there is that offense, and we've got nothing to backstop. When a kid comes back from suspension, we need to have something there for them and for the family to be working with. So I think that's kind of like our rush on this, is that we want that support into place for kids, and it's long overdue here. And we can talk about that MOU at the nest, but we'd like to be able to have the ability to try to move forward so that we can have something in place when kids come back.
Yeah, more to your point, Kevin, I'm sanguine that they would come in and begin that assessment and survey the staff absent an MOU. If I just say to them, listen, this is pending board approval, but if I can take the temperature of the board tonight, and I was sensing that folks weren't generally opposed, I'm sure they'd have that willingness so that you guys could inspect that language more thoroughly at the next board meeting.
Is there a school board member that would like to make the motion to approve the process outlined in Superintendent Ray's memo to the board, subject to a review of an review of an MOA at a subsequent meeting on the 22nd?
So moved. I'm trying to paraphrase what you just stated.
I was going to do the same thing, to be honest. I was going to say. I'll second that.
So I move that we move forward with the recommendation to engage with Day One, pending review of the MOU.
Second.
Motion's been made by School Board Member LaFortune, second by School Board Member Johnston, to move forward subject to the approval of an MOA or MOU in the future. Any discussion?
I think this is a great idea.
I just wanted to echo that too. When Superintendent Ray brought it up several weeks ago, I was very much on board. And now seeing with the memo that was provided to us earlier, that the fee is nominal compared to what some kids are up against, and especially given what we've been through in the past almost 2 years now. I think kids can use whatever support they can get, and I think it is long overdue to have something like this in place at the middle school. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Roll. School Board Member Archie?
I apologize for the delayed question that just came to me. So we are talking about billing the state and individual insurances. How are we going to get that? How are they going to get that information?
No, so the school department does not do any of the billing. Day One manages the billing, and they have an age, and I don't remember what it is. It's 13 or 14, by which the law requires that they notify parents that they're offering services, and at that age, they can request that they bill insurance. before the child reaches that age, if the service is rendered in confidentiality, they bill main care or they eat the cost through a grant that they have. But the school department doesn't get involved in billing at all, which is one of the advantages.
Right, I misworded that.
Yeah.
Roll call vote. School Board Member Archie?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune?
Yes.
School Board Member Gale?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, folks.
That brings us to item 13, other information. There's no other information in the packet.
There isn't any in the packet, but I do have other information.
School
So,
Board Member LaFortune.
Since we have ultimately come through an election, and as of a day or two ago, we now have 2 new school board members. We're now at the point where we have, that the next meeting would ultimately be our administrative meeting. And so just letting people know that at that meeting, we will be selecting a chair, selecting a vice chair, and in theory, putting the committee structures back together. The current layout of the committees is basically populated with the 4 existing school board members prior to the election. And so to spread that around and provide opportunities not only for the 2 new school board members to be part of those committees, but also give existing school board members opportunities to maybe change committees if they want to move to something else. I'd ask that the school board members think between now and then whether they would like to remain on the committees that they're on, if there's interest in other committees they'd like to be on, and then maybe at some point let me know. For the new members, the committees that we have are the Strategic Committee, which is primarily around the policy development, which has not been scheduled based on the assessment that's being done by MSMA. There's the Finance Committee that does meet regularly. That's pretty much once a month. And the one thing to note with that is that is usually the collection of people that are responsible for signing the warrants that make sure all the bills get paid. So that's a consideration to make. That's something that has to typically be done during the day. Infrastructure and technology periodically meets. I don't recall the last time that has met, since there haven't been any issues that have come up. And the last one is personnel, which typically only meets when there are development of job descriptions and things like that. So those are the 4 main committees. Negotiations only really gets created when we have an actual negotiation with a collective bargaining group. But just between now and the next meeting, please give some thought to those 4 committees and whether you want to stay on them, whether you would like to move over and get back to me.
Thank you. Any other information? Okay, moving forward to item 14. Is there a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
No, we have to actually state the,
School Board Member Truman, if you could read the 1 MRSA, just so we satisfy.
Sorry, it wasn't on my confidentials.
Thank you.
I move that we move into executive session per 1 MSRA subsection 405-6F, discussion or review of confidential records.
Motion's been made by School Board Member Truman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by School Board Member Preble. Any discussion? Roll call vote. School Board Member Archie?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune?
yes.
School Board Member Gale?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to enter executive session at 8:43 p.m. Executive session will be downstairs in the conference room. We're back at 9:18. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
School Board Member Truman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by School Board Member Johnston. Any discussion on exiting executive session? Roll call vote. School Board Member Archie?
Yes.
School Board Member Preble?
Yes.
School Board Member Richard?
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune?
Yes.
School Board Member Gale?
Yes.
School Board Member Truman?
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 9:18. Brings us to item 15. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, move
Board-
we adjourn.
School Board Member LaFortune, is there a second?
Second.
School Board Member Preble. Discussion on adjournment. Roll call vote to adjourn. School Board Member Archie.
Yes.
School Board Member Preble.
Yes.
School Board Member Richard.
Yes.
School Board Member LaFortune.
Yes.
School Board Member Gale.
Yes.
School Board Member Truman.
Yes.
School Board Member Johnston.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn passes 7-0 at 9:19. Have a great evening, everyone.